just going from delivering to 5 streets around my house to now delivering London-wide and everybody eating the same food of an evening, that feels like a real pinch me moment. Yeah, I feel pride that we are delivering nourishing food and taking people away from unhealthy eating and unhealthy food on a weekly basis. With DabbaDrop, we've now saved just under 400,000 plastic containers from ending up in landfill. You know, apart from all the nourishing food, the sort of environmental impact is quite big as well. So, you know, it makes you feel pretty good waking up in the morning knowing you're making such a big difference to our dear planet.
Today's guest is Anshu Ahuja, who's the co-founder of DabbaDrop. They deliver healthy cooked meals using tiffin boxes, which makes it more environmentally friendly. Anshu's got an incredible story, having worked in TV for many years before deciding she just didn't want to continue working in the industry. She knew she loved food, and she started off small. One of her first customers became a co-founder, and since then they continue to grow, especially during the pandemic. And what's interesting too, she talked about after the pandemic and things opening up again, how that affected the business and what she learned from that. They continue to go from strength to strength and to raise significant amounts of money from crowdfunding because their customers love them so much. There's lots you can learn from this episode. I'm Amma from the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking.
So great to have you here today, and it's amazing to see your journey so far. But if we take you right back to the beginning, when you were a kid growing up, what were your dreams? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. Love your podcast and love all the guests that you've featured. And you're obviously such a lovely guy. So it's nice to have a chat as well. So back to when I was a kid. Do you know what? Funny thing is, I've always been interested in food, even since I was 3-4 years old. I've always liked, with my dolls, throwing dinner parties or cooking for people, and bringing a smile to people's faces through food. That's always been a passion of mine. I remember at school, I grew up in Mumbai, I went to school there. There was a choice between home economics and studying computing. My parents, obviously this was the early 80s, they were very keen on me. My mum was a feminist, and my parents were both quite liberal, so they were like, no, you should do computing, that's a safe career. Home economics, what does that mean? You'll just sit at home and be a housewife? Anyway, I was quite rebellious, and I was like, well, do you know what, Mum and Dad, I'm actually going to do home economics because I love cooking and I want to follow what I'm passionate about. So even in those early days, I was kind of, going for what I love doing rather than following the kind of safe trajectory, which, I guess was the rebel in me always. So when I was young, I wanted to work in food. I didn't know in what form. And in the 80s, I guess the only form really was to have like a little cafe or, bake cakes out of your home or mithai sweets in Bombay. But I always wanted to work in food. But life took me on a different sort of trajectory, I guess. But here I am back after all that time working in food. So, big tick, I guess, for me.
So as you said, it's interesting there because career options now are different. So at that time, it said if you're working in food, you could have your own restaurant, you could have your own cafe. But now there's so many other options available. So you decided not to go down the route, I guess, of going for your own restaurant. What did you decide to do at university and what took you down that path?
So I moved to the UK to go to university, and I guess I was sort of, quite moving to a new place. I didn't move with any family. I was on my own. So, I remember going to career counselling and they were like, look, the sort of, I suppose fruitful, successful careers are, in media and publishing, and you've obviously got, quite a creative slant to you. I was awful at maths and science. So, I failed pretty much. So, those were not really an option for me. So, the counselling was very much around the creative arts and things like that. I couldn't paint or draw either. So it was quite limited in that sense. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, I know I can cook, but that is not being laid out on the table to me. So I'm going to, go do media and make films. I mean, obviously, I loved movies as well. So growing up in Bombay, the home of Bollywood. So I was like, okay, well, I'll try my hand at making movies. And, I arrived in the UK very sort of determined and, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and, wanting to make the most of the opportunity that I had, I guess. And so after university, this was back in 2002. I hand wrote. I didn't really have a computer, and university was closed for summer or something along those lines. But I hand wrote 120 letters and delivered them and walked around Soho. And, back in the days where you used an A to Z to go down, Beak Street and Berwick Street and to all these production houses and hand delivered these letters. Because I was like, that's my only way of actually sort of meeting these people. I didn't have an into the film industry. I didn't have any family, and it's quite a sort of, it's a close-knit industry, I suppose. So I just kind of walked into these offices and I was like, this is who I am, and I'm free all of this summer. If you need an intern or a runner, I'm happy to make coffee, and here's a letter and my resume. I've got no experience, but I'm, willing to do whatever you want me to do, essentially. So I think I got, 99 rejection letters, and one company was like, okay, we've got an opening for a couple of months, so come on board and, give us a hand. So that's kind of how it started. And from that, work experience job, I went on to work at a big TV company. And over the course of 10 years, sort of worked my way up from runner to researcher to assistant producer and director, and then series producer.
Obviously, like going into the media industry is really difficult. And you tried to do it in London as well, which, like you said, you didn't have the network and things like that. But you also mentioned you're from Bombay, where Bollywood is. So what made you decide to like stick in the UK and try it here, rather than maybe in Bollywood, where you might have been able to have other connections or other things going on there?
Good question. I guess I was trying. I was in the second year of university, and I knew I had one more year to go, and I wanted to make the most of the opportunity I had here, get as much experience working on different kinds of productions before deciding whether I wanted to move back to India, back home or not. And to be honest, I felt very much that I fitted in here in London, in the UK, more than I did back home in Mumbai, which, I guess that's for a variety of reasons, but, I just felt freer. I just felt I could, I wasn't trapped by the, this is what a good Indian girl should do sort of situation being out here in London. And I could kind of spread my wings in whichever direction I wanted to and try out different things without kind of being told, well, no, that's not the way you should be heading down. It's not really my immediate family who did that, but it's like, the society around you in India sometimes, especially in, the late 90s, early 2000s, it was still quite, everything was still stereotyped quite a lot. So, which is, I was kind of already on that trajectory. So I was like, okay, no, I'm going to try and make it work here, even though it's going to be much harder. So yeah, I just was like knocking on doors. I remember I would call my mum and be like, oh my God, that was so bad. No one's given me a job, But I guess you just kind of wake up the next morning and you're like, well, here's another day and I've got to try again. What else can you do? It's just, if you want something really badly, then you've just got to keep moving forward, like however many setbacks there are. And of course, there are days where you're just like, is this even worth it? Am I even good enough? Am I, maybe it's just not meant to be. Then you just find the resolve somewhere inside you and it's just suddenly clicks and you just keep moving forward. So, yeah.
I think one of the biggest indicators of like successful entrepreneurship as well is showing that you're willing to do those hard things earlier on as well. So many people wouldn't have been willing to go, once you got that many rejection letters, just keep sending more letters. And they go for the easy option, maybe of like they could do it in like Mumbai rather than doing it here and things like that. So choosing the hard sometimes I think can be sometimes a good indicator.
I don't know. I mean, some people might say that's just foolish. Like, you're just kind of, I don't know, you've just got this dogged sense inside you that, do you know what? Actually, I deserve more, or I deserve better, or I know I can do this. Like, even though everything around you is telling you actually, well, maybe you don't have the right experience, or we don't need this kind of person right now. You're just like, no, but I know I can do it. So you just keep moving forward. I mean, yeah, whether it's kind of foolish or whatever you said, which sounded quite nice. I don't know.
So you had quite a long career in TV as well. And obviously you did different positions there. And you mentioned how when you were younger, you thought about food. when you're going for that TV career, how did you feel at that point? Were you enjoying it? Were you getting fulfilled? And then what made you take the decisions you did within that career to end up where you did?
I mean, I always thought when I was working in TV, and I tried really hard to kind of move towards more of the food side of things, you know, to work on food programs or a food documentary or even Ready, Steady, Cook. Do you remember that show? I used to love watching it back in the day. But it just never happened. You know, it's you get pigeonholed and you end up. So I used to end up working on Indian programs, or you know, I did a program for Channel 4 called Bollywood Star, and then I made a documentary about gay and lesbian Muslims. So you just get sort of typecast slightly within the industry, and then you just get called to work on those types of shows. So sadly, my dream of working in food TV just never took off. I never worked on a single one. Yet. Yeah. I mean, in the early days, absolutely, I loved it. And, you know, as a runner, as a researcher, as an assistant producer, it was a great time. As I was going into directing, I'd just recently gotten married, and I was shortly after I got pregnant with my first. And that's when things became quite tricky with no immediate family or network here to look after the kids. It became really hard to juggle both having a very, very full-on job, and TV is a very full-on career. You're just constantly on, and everything should have been done yesterday. Deadlines are crazy. So you never really get to, kind of properly switch off or have any balance. So that's when it kind of got hard. And I was like, I don't know if, and when you have a child, you kind of want to make the most of that as well. You can't just go, okay, well, sorry, I'm just going to get a nanny. I mean, some people do, and there's no judgment, and it's fine. It's just what you want to do, right? And I very much felt that when I had children, I would be, around with them as much as possible and kind of watch them grow up and take their first steps, or, just be with them as they go through those early milestones. Even prior to having children, I was, doing little side hustles in the food industry, kind of doing little pop-ups or sub clubs, or I had a market stall. So I was kind of testing out whether it would be possible to do this.
Tell us a bit more about the market stall there.
Yeah, so it was, I don't know if you know this food item from Mumbai called vada pav, which is essentially a chip butty. It's carb on carb.
It sounds cooler in Hindi, right?
Vada pav, yeah. It's carb on carb. So you got, this beautifully soft roll called pav, which is inspired by the Portuguese and their time in Mumbai. And then you have a deep fried, spiced potato dumpling, which is then squashed in the middle with tons of chutneys, tamarind and coriander, and a fried green chili. So I used to serve that up at an organic farmers market in Stoke Newington. Wake up at 4 a.m. and roll all these balls of potato patties and then deep fry them and go off and sell them in the freezing cold, So and then so I tried that for a while, and I mean, for one reason or another, I'd got called on a different shoot, which meant I was away for 3 months, so I had to shut that down. So TV was always kind of, the bread and butter, but I tried lots of different food opportunities. So I had 2 kids by this point. I just finished on a job as a series producer on a show for Channel 4, and we were taking a bit of time off as a family. And I remember we were in New Zealand, actually, which was lovely and quiet and as far away from the world as possible to do all this soul searching and thinking. And I was saying to my husband, I don't know, I think it's time for me to just properly try whether I can leave TV. I mean, the funny thing is, everyone who works in TV always wants to leave because it's so full on, and you just end up, all the situations you end up in, which you may have thought was really exciting when you were in your 20s. In your 30s, you're just like, this, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if this is how I want to be spending my life. It just doesn't feel, it feels manipulative, and I want to be giving back to the world. I want to be working on programs that are respectful and ethical and all of those sort of existential questions that I think most people go through when they're sort of mid-30s. Anyway, so I was saying that to my husband, and I was like, on these long drives while we were driving through the South Island, I was starting to think about what I could do while having 2 children, and kind of work around them and also earn a living. So, I was interested in sustainability. I was obviously really interested in Indian food, and that's what I'd grown up with, and I loved cooking it. And I knew from ordering in takeaways that really was so either really bland or just kind of bastardized. So I knew that that's where my heart was. So I was like, listen, I'm just going to take a couple of months off, and I'm going to, and that's what I would have done looking for new jobs. I was freelance. So I was like, I'm going to take a couple of months off. I came up with the idea, built this website from scratch on my kid's iPad, I got a child Squarespace account. I mean, I make it sound like I knew what I was doing. I really didn't. I was kind of teaching myself via tutorials on YouTube or, just kind of learning through Google, essentially, Google Classroom.
Best way to learn.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, let me just try it out. And it took off. I thought, maybe I'll get like 10, 15 orders, but it kind of week on week, it just sort of seemed to double.
How did you get those first customers?
I just sort of, I had a group of mums that, I was on a WhatsApp group with, and I was like, listen, guys, sorry to bombard and do a sales kind of not off kids topic sort of message, but I'm thinking of setting up this business, and it's called DabbaDrop, and this is the concept. We deliver in tiffin tins, so there's no plastic, and all of these mums were sustainability sort of conscious anyway, and they were into vegetarian food. All the parents were kind of having to spend more time at home because they had kids, and they weren't sort of able to go out on a Friday night as they used to, so they were like, look, yeah, sign me up, because I'm not going anywhere. So, and then it was just word of mouth. And so Renee, my co-founder, had, I think, the second sort of round of deliveries on the second week. And then, she loved it. And she was like, listen, if you're ever looking to kind of, join forces, let me know. So it was all quite organic. There was no, I hate to say it, there was no real sort of strategy as such in the early days. It was just like, okay, let's just try and see if this would work. It's, can I leave my old job and kind of set up something that could be A, fulfilling, B, able to work around the kids, make us a living, and actually do some good. So those were the kind of non-negotiables for me, really. And you just start, really. I mean, if you spend so much time kind of coming up with the perfect formula, you'll just end up never doing anything. So I was just like, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to apologize, and I'm going to learn along the way, and just kind of say, look, this is the first time I'm doing it. Just give me your honest feedback, and, we'll obviously improve as we keep growing. And it's kind of how we did it, really.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HSBC have got the team that are built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. So with your co-founder as well, so she was one of your early customers.
Yeah.
How did you then work out whether this would work and you could be a good team? Did you have that conversation about, okay, I'll be in charge of this, you'll be in charge of that? Or how did you do that at the beginning?
It's an ongoing conversation. As founders, you end up wearing every single hat possible. So some days Renee would be the cyclist and I would be the chef, whereas other days I would be the accountant and Renee would be the ops manager. So, it's like I think we just took it day by day, because there were so many jobs to be done, and we're like, okay, this is a long list of things to do. Let's kind of both go through it and tick off what needs to be done. And so really we wanted to build a system where we were kind of job sharing, because we were building a business around the children, so that if one person had poorly kids, the other person could cover for them completely. And if we had meetings at school, one of us would go and take notes for both of us, essentially. So, and then the kids stayed at home with the other person. So we didn't have that kind of grown-up conversation of like, okay, I'm going to be the ops director and you're going to be the CEO or whatever, because there were too many jobs that needed to be done. It's still the same way. We don't really have the fancy title of I'm this and I'm that. We do, like this week, we've got someone who's off sick. And so I'm going to be covering their shift, which is portioning out all the dabbas. So we still do pretty much all the jobs there is. And sometimes we are on our bikes delivering as well. So yeah, I'll tell you what was hard though, going from being friends to being business partners. That was more of a tricky trajectory. And it still is, because it is a different relationship when you're friends with someone and you're casual and you can go out for a drink and you can have a sort of non-professional conversation. And then you have to suddenly actually be like, well, we're both accountable and we're both directors of a business. So, you know, that shift was hard. And I suppose it is sad, but we're more now business partners than we are friends. And maybe in the long term, like, we will end up being both. But that is the journey you take when you kind of go into business with a friend, I suppose. And it does put a toll on your friendship. And there are, you know, you end up spending so much time with each other. You kind of, you don't want to see each other when, on your downtime, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, it's tricky, but you know, conversation and communication can help you get over all the hurdles if you're just clear right from the start about, you know, your relationship and who's responsible for what. And, you know, you hold each other accountable, and if you don't take things personally when, you know, if somebody gives you feedback or says that maybe you should have done this better, or, you know, you haven't finished this job, can you let me know when it's done? It's all about just kind of knowing you're in the same on the same boat, heading in the same direction. And yeah, I mean, on that note, I guess Rene and I sometimes do want to go in different directions, and we argue, and, you know, I say argue, we have a nice sort of rounded debate about what is right for the business, because we both care and it's coming from a good place. So yeah, and I think founders can disagree. It's okay, you know. Anyone can disagree. It's just finding a way back and knowing, you know, finding what is right for the business or the venture. That's the most important thing.
And obviously you've grown the team out since those early days as well.
Yeah.
When did you decide it was the right moment to bring on that first employee and to expand the team?
I mean, we were actually really lucky. So we were working from a little shared kitchen in Dalston. And this was in early 2020, maybe late 2019. And we'd sort of we'd outgrown that kitchen essentially. And we were looking for a new space. And we were also rebuilding the website. And we were like, listen, you know, I think we need to have, while we're kind of resetting up the kitchen, we might need someone who can kind of manage the orders and kind of make sure everything is working smoothly while we're focusing on rebuilding the kitchen. So we actually hired someone Rene had worked with previously at her time at Caravan Restaurants. And really luckily, because we went into lockdown in March 2020, and we were obviously homeschooling, as well as our orders grew by 300% in the space of 2 weeks. So we were literally all hands to deck, you know, juggling crazy amounts. We had run out of tiffins. We had an 800-person waiting list, you know, managing emails, all of that. So yes, that's the first person we hired. We had a few part-time chefs before then, but that is the first proper employee. We had Shelley, and it was, she stayed with us up until August this year, so a full 5 years. And she went from, you know, a sort of e-commerce assistant to being a head of operations, and now she's going back to Australia. So yeah, no, she also wore lots of different hats being with us, and you know, I guess that's the quality you look for when you hire your first employee as a startup is someone who can roll up their sleeves and get involved in every single thing, who can be an extension of the founder essentially, who, you know, you can say at midnight like, hey, you know, there's a leak in the kitchen, I need you there at 6 a.m. to kind of sweep it all out, and then, you know, make sure all the bins are clean and all of that kind of stuff. So someone who is on your side as much as, you know, your co-founder or that inner team.
And I think that's obviously the difference between, say, hiring somebody at a corporate versus a startup, is that they need to really be part of it too, where they feel like this is, they're going the extra mile because they care about what you're doing as well.
The mission.
Yeah. And if they care about that, then like doing the odd thing here and there is a bit out of their job description.
Yeah.
They won't mind so much. But you mentioned there as well that you did it just before the pandemic. what impact did that have on the business? Because obviously so many things changed there for the restaurant industry, for hospitality industry. How did that affect you guys?
So we grew by 300% in the space of 2 weeks. So we had to obviously, make sure that we could fulfill all those orders, so all that food being cooked. So we had to hire lots of new chefs, lots of new cyclists, and also get more space to be able to store all this food. We unfortunately didn't have access to tiffins, the dabbas that we deliver in. So we had to stagger, because India had basically locked down as well. So we were waiting for our shipment to arrive from India, which fortunately did 4 weeks into lockdown. So then we could open up those orders again. So it was lockdown was 2 years essentially, wasn't it? So we had huge scale, and then coming out of lockdown was actually slightly harder because people started going out again, so it sort of balanced out, and we had to let people go, and that was hard. We had an office that we couldn't really afford, so it was having to kind of make, as a founder, you're like, oh my God, we've grown, we're profitable, this is great, we've done it, yay. And then you're like, oh no, we've not. We're in the red again. So, it's just like pulling all those strings and making sure you pull it back, and, you kind of get to a sort of stable place again. That was hard. Coming out of lockdown was really hard because we tried our best not to kind of shrink the team. We sort of, invested more in marketing. We tried lots of different things. Renee and I were out a lot more often, talking to customers and working out exactly what they needed. But, ultimately, if the P&L is not working, you have to make those tough decisions. And that's what we had to do. And so, it was the seesaw of the pandemic. 1 minute you're up and the next minute you're back down to, literally we had to start from scratch almost. And it was around the time where we were expanding, because we were still only delivering to Hackney and Islington postcodes. And so we expanded to deliver London-wide. So that took a hit on our sort of, P&L as well, because we were sort of, forking out for deliveries when we hadn't matured in these areas. So it was quite, it was a tough decision, but we're glad we went with we followed our instincts, and, we believed in the fact that if there are people in Hackney buying from us, there will be people in, Kensington also interested in the same offer. So we stuck with it. And now, as of May this year, we're profitable again, which is, it's such a good feeling. I don't know why, but it really is. It makes your shoulders go down and you can kind of settle. Then I remember my dad sort of saying to me after our first fundraise, don't forget cash burn. Like, you've got to conserve cash. He's a very conservative man,
It's really interesting, like I said, because for a lot of other companies, the pandemic had their negative effect because people were locked up or things like that. Whereas you had this other period of, I guess you almost had to start planning for, like you said, where once the pandemic ends, then you've now got more competition from, not direct competition, but like because people are out again, they're not maybe using your service as much. So it's really interesting to see the other side of things. Yeah. And you mentioned there about the fundraise as well. What made you decide to do the first fundraise, and like what was behind that reasoning? So
we were, it was sort of when we were coming out of lockdown, we were thinking about, how to grow, basically. So we were only delivering in Hackney and Islington, and we constantly had our customers writing to us and saying, hey, I've got friends in X, Y, and Z, and, why don't you guys start delivering to them? And we were like, well, we'd love to, but we don't have any money to be able to invest into the business. Because we'd used all our profits from when we had grown in lockdown to build a much bigger kitchen, assuming foolishly that after lockdown, life would continue being the same. Because we had so many customers interested, we were like, okay, well, let's do an email to all our customers to ask if they would like to invest in the business and for equity and, help us scale up from an East London concept to a London-wide concept. And the response we had was phenomenal. And, we raised £450,000 over the course of, I think it was 6 weeks or something. So, it was really encouraging. And then, we used all that money to kind of build a better website and expand our offering London-wide. And then coming out again, So in April 2024, that's the year we're in now, we did another fundraise to be able to enhance our offering and look at possibly expanding outside of London as well. So that's what we've just come out of. And we did it both times the same way, a crowdfund, mainly our customers. And the response is like, it's always humbling. And your customers also, alongside your sort of early employees, believe in the mission as much as you do. And they're aligned with your vision. They obviously love your food and they want you to invest in the product and make it better. And it's like a little secret they want the world to know. So in the early stages, it's a really good way of raising capital rather than going for the big VC money.
It must be such a good feeling as well when you send out the initial email. Because I guess when you send out the initial, you don't know for sure yet whether or not people are going to be like, yeah, we want to back this, want to help you grow.
Yeah.
Because there's one thing when people say it versus actually putting their money in and actually doing it. So it must have been such a validating feeling to know that your customers actually really care and really want to see that succeed. And as that's gone along, how have you seen that relationship with those customers as well? How do you maintain this? So I guess there's a lot of people who invested. Are you able to keep in touch with them, or how do you manage those, like that relationship with those early customers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Investor relations are really important, in the same as customer relations are really important. So we kind of have check-in points with all of our investors. We do a quarterly investor report. We always provide direct email addresses so they can get in touch with us. We, give them discount codes so they can offer it to their friends. We've sent them tote bags with, our logo and, so they can do some free publicity for us as well. It's just kind of making them feel as part of the journey as possible. We also say if you want to invite some friends around, we'll drop in an extra dabba so you can kind of share the love. They're ambassadors as well, after all, of your business. So, that's kind of how we've maintained it. And as we grow, we'll probably do that even more, make them as much part of the business.
Looking at where you are today, right? So you've had these different journeys and you had that tough period coming out of the pandemic and then now had this high moment of the customers backing you and supporting you and then doing it again this year. What are some of the biggest wins so far? If you're looking at where you are today, what are you most proud of? And where do you think the company's really succeeded?
I mean, personally, as a founder, obviously it was a business that I set up to work around my family life. So that is the first kind of validation, just going from delivering to 5 streets around my house to now delivering London wide and everybody eating the same food of an evening. That feels like a real pinch me moment. And, it's quite incredible. Like you can have a dream and actually make it happen. It's weird, right? Like, I mean, obviously it takes a bit of luck, but, just kind of coming up with an idea and just kind of making a plan and doing it and putting some words on a piece of paper and saying, right, I'm going to tick these things off and then that will make this business viable. And you do that and you make it viable. That kind of feels really, really exciting. But obviously on a bigger level, outside of my own personal sort of ambitions, it's a business that's doing good. We're providing healthy, nourishing food to thousands of tables across London on a weekly basis. And there's no plastic in the packaging. So that is definitely, it makes you sleep better at night knowing that you are nourishing all these thousands of people and making a difference. It's a real sort of, I feel pride that we are delivering nourishing food and taking people away from unhealthy eating and unhealthy food on a weekly basis.
So you mentioned there a couple of times about the sustainability elements of it as well. So obviously you use cyclists, you don't use any plastic. Can you talk about that element as well and the impact you're making on the sustainability side?
Absolutely. So the whole concept was, had sustainability at the heart of it. We have a plant-based offering. So it's, plant-forward dishes that are kind of inspired by home-style recipes, mainly from South Asia, but from across the world as well. We have all our deliveries take place in Dabba tins, which are stacked metal tins that are all kind of fitted together. And we just sort of swap these out when we deliver your next Dabba. It's a subscription model. And then all the deliveries happen on bikes, either, old-fashioned single-speed bikes or big cargo bikes. With DabbaDrop, we've now saved just under 400,000 plastic containers from ending up in landfill. We've saved 54 million litres of water. And nearly 200,000 CO2 emissions. So it is, apart from all the nourishing food, the sort of environmental impact is quite big as well. So, it makes you feel pretty good waking up in the morning knowing you're making such a big difference to our dear planet as well.
That's awesome. So one more question before the quick fire questions.
Yep.
Is obviously you've made a big impact so far through the food and also, like you said, on the impact on the climate and the planet as well. But you're going London-wide now. What's the dreams? Where do you see this being in the next few years?
That is the big question within the business. So, for the next 6 months, we're very much focused on enhancing our offering in London. So we only deliver zones 1 to 3, and we want to expand to the whole of the M25. Beyond that, we're looking at franchising options, actually, to go scale faster across the UK to various cities and also towns as well. And there are other ideas to get into retail, which, are not finalized yet, but that is on the cards as well. So it's kind of taking DabbaDrop or DabbaDrop, as if I was to pronounce it correctly, from just being a sort of, D2C business to becoming omni-channel and having us available at lots of different touch points across the sort of spectrum as well.
So great to hear your story today. We're going to need to go to a quick fire questions now. So first one is, who are 3 British Asians you think are doing incredible work and you'd love to shout them out?
So there is a lady called Samyukta Nair who owns... Actually, I came across her and her dad's business back when I lived in Mumbai. They used to run a beautiful hotel, well, they still do, called the Leela Hotel. And they now run 4 or 5 restaurants here in the UK. One of them is called Bombay Bustle, which is kind of inspired by the same Dabbawala tradition as we are. In fact, we're talking about possibly doing some work together, which is really exciting. I love what she's done with her restaurants and, really sort of amplified Indian culture here in the UK and Indian food. So that's really exciting. There's another lady called, and she's not strictly British Asian. She's Indian, but she is here in the UK and she's selling her products here in the UK now. So her name is Sana Javeri Kadri. She owns Diaspora Spices. And she sells spices straight from the farmers in India to firstly in America, but now also recently available in the UK. The spices are gorgeous. She is an amazing founder. She's in her early 30s. I mean, she's doing so much single-handedly. Kudos to her. And then Ishita, I think you had her on this podcast. She runs By Rotation.
So at the time we're recording this, tomorrow we got a fireside chat. We're doing an event with 120 people with her.
Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah. So I'm seeing her tomorrow and it's for her on Friday.
Hi. Yeah. Really inspired by her as well. Obviously, sustainability is at the core of her business. So, and it is ours as well. So I love what she's doing and the community she's built and given so many women a chance to earn a livelihood by sort of putting their clothes on rent to other women. So she's done something really cool and very, very excited to follow her journey.
Awesome. And then if people want to find out more about you and find out more about DabbaDrop, where should they go to?
So DabbaDrop, dabbadrop.co.uk is where you can hear all about us. We also have a Instagram handle called @DabbaDrop. And then I post regularly on LinkedIn. My name's Anshu Ahuja. And so, all the information is out there for everyone to read.
And is there anything that you need help with right now yourself or DabbaDrop needs help with? Maybe the audience could help with?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always looking for new customers. That's, one of the big missions for this year is to kind of get everyone to try a DabbaDrop at least once. So, tell your friends, tell your neighbours, tell your family. We are delivering London zones 1 to 3. So if you live in those zones, we'd love to feed you. And then beyond that, we're always looking for advisors. We're looking to sort of put together an updated advisory team. So if there's any advisors out there, founders who've, grown a subscription business, exited founders, would always love to hear from you.
Awesome. So thanks so much for coming on again. Have you got any final words?
No, I mean, that was a lovely chat. Thank you so much. That was really good fun to talk about my story and DabbaDrop's story. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.